Hello everyone, hello again. So back again on stage with a very interesting topic. We're moving to efficiencies, so capitalizing on efficiencies for wholesale players. This is the ambitious title we gave to this session, which we will be discussing over the next 40 minutes. So efficiencies, if you look at what we've discussed over the last day and a half now, we talked a lot about new business models. We heard about CPaaS yesterday morning. We heard Ignacio talking about moving from wholesale to wholesale. We had Isabel this morning talking about new business models around roaming and what 5G would be bringing along. So obviously these are new areas for growth, new opportunities to tackle, but these can also be tackled if efficiencies and if carriers also become more efficient in the way they do business. Hence, it goes hand in hand with being able to address those growth, the opportunity and the capability to leverage efficiencies both at a carrier level, the player level, but also at industry level is really key to succeed in the future. So in order to be able to further develop on this, I'm really happy to be the moderator of this upcoming session, and I'm glad to introduce you to our four panelists. First, Faïssal Houhou, who is a very active member of the mobile ecosystem community, SVP Business Development at Lenderwize. Thank you very much for joining, Faïssal. Really happy to have you on board.
Thank you, Suzy.
Hello. We have Mark Stewart, who's the CEO of Bank of Telecom, IMC. Thank you, Mark, for joining us today.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. We have Jussi, Makela, whom you heard earlier today in the fraud fight against fraud forum. Jussi, welcome back, and thank you for joining us this time to talk about efficiencies.
No, thank you, Suzy. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Great, pleasure shared. And last but not least, we have Simon Dodsworth. Simon has two hats. He's the head of voice and messaging at Telecom, but today he leaves that hat off and he will take the one of the Executive Council member representing Global Solutions Council. Thank you, Simon. We don't see you, Simon. I hope you can come on live and you can hear us. No? Okay. So hopefully Simon will be able to join us in a few seconds. So first of all, thank you to all of you. What I'd like to do, and hoping that Simon can come also very shortly, is to first introduce yourselves, but introduce what your companies are doing in terms of business, but really with the angle of the topic we're going to be talking about, which is efficiencies. So if I know so Jussi and Simon will be representing forums, so the angle is a bit different, but I'll leave the floor probably to Faïssal and Mark to start with, and then we'll move on to Jussi and hopefully Simon when he joins in. So Faïssal, if you'd like to introduce yourself and what you do and what your company does, that would be fantastic.
Hello, everybody. So Lenderwize is a London-based company. We are sitting at level 39 in Canary Wharf. We have operations in UK, in Australia, in Italy, in Switzerland, and in Netherlands. We have developed a fintech platform that funds digital commodities, which include wholesale in general, which is wholesale voice, wholesale SMS, and wholesale data. In a nutshell, today, in terms of efficiency, there are different players in the whole ecosystem. We are talking about tier 1, working with tier 1 or tier 2, sometimes tier 3. And the payment conditions of each of the players are not the same. Some people have to pay their invoices within 7 days, some in 2 days, and they receive their invoices paid after 30 and 60 days. Lenderwize platform is in between, and we help people to receive their invoices within days instead of months. That helps them to make their business grow quicker and to solve a big issue, which is a cash flow issue, so that the whole ecosystem can grow in a very smooth way. This is what we do in a very short way.
Mark?
Okay, I'm Mark Stewart, I'm the CEO at Bank of Telecom. And Bank of Telecom is the world's automated marketplace for telecoms trade. So in terms of efficiencies, how does that work? Well, Bank of Telecom does two main things. One, on the bank side of the Bank of Telecom, it helps with international settlements. So basically, our trade partners and members can receive fast payments in 171 countries, I think 132 currencies. So that's nice to have, and that sort of helps with the efficiency of payment and trade, general trade and cash flow. And then obviously on the telecom side, we're automating the actual telecoms trade, and I use that in the broadest sense. So in terms of trade, I mean the sales activity, the operations activity, and also the finance activity. So in the case of sales, we're helping customers and suppliers to buy and sell faster at higher margins, make sales quicker and increase traffic. On the operations side, we're basically cutting through the inefficiencies of having lots of independent NOCs in silos, all doing their own thing in terms of trouble tickets and also monitoring traffic statistics and so on by sharing in a global test area lots of trouble tickets and also the results of all tests with every member, so that members NOCs don't actually always need to test. They can just look at the previous results of other companies. And on finance, we've just got an open house, transparent system where you can look at all the payments and so on and so forth, and your SOA. So it's all online, so no need to contact sales. So basically, it's a very efficient platform and therefore very relevant to today's discussion.
Thank you very much for this, Mark. So, hello, Simon. Just before I come to you, I'll let Jussi introduce really, again, what the GLF does, but more with the lens of the efficiencies this time. So just give us a bit of an insight in terms of what GLF does to improve efficiencies within the carrier industry, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Suzy. So I'm Jussi, Makela, and I'm the director of organization called ITW Global Leaders Forum, or GLF for short. And we are a organization that represents the commercial executive leadership of the carrier, the largest international carrier, so the international carrier industry. So we do, a number of things. It's a lot of it is about maintaining, supporting interoperability. It's about working towards ensuring this ubiquitous connectivity around the world, and clearly elements such as efficiencies. And it's about that business side of the thing. So we're not a technical forum. We are not a standards body. What we are really focused is on the commercial, how, you would say, not just the technical interoperability, but having this commercial interoperability as well. And there you have efficiency very critical. And what do we mean by that? We mean that there shouldn't be, we are working to ensure that there is no barriers for the business of communication existing in there. We're trying to address some of the inefficiencies perhaps that exist in the industry that are stopping business between carriers and between any kind of ICT communication service provider to happen. We also look at and work towards ensuring that there are issues such as fraud or security, all of these sort of elements that can negatively impact our business as well as the society as a whole, that happens through the communications industry. So those are very relevant, and of course you could say that all of those have efficiency element in there. If we can reduce fraud, that will mean increase in efficiency, because we are losing less money on fraud. We are not spending as much time on dispute resolutions and all that. But a big deal of it is as well is that how do we do business now? How can we automate elements that are currently not done automatically? How do we ensure that the future opportunities that exist, whether it's data on demand or IoT or various other kinds of applications that are relevant in international carrier side. How do we ensure that the business side of it is done in a way that we don't create future problems to ourselves? So let's talk already about what those commercial frameworks could potentially be in terms of how do we transact business. What's the best way of us working together as an industry, as across through the whole chain, and that's the relevant here. So pretty broad brush in terms of efficiency, but I'd say that probably touches absolutely everything that we try and do.
Good, great. Thank you very much, Jussi, and thank you, Simon, for joining in. Sorry for the little hiccup at the very beginning of this session, but we're very happy to have you on board now. I guess there's a lot happening in the Global Solutions Forum, I understand. So maybe if you could shed some light into what the forum does in terms of efficiencies, so that we get to understand where the value add of this particular forum, that would be fantastic.
Of course, thanks, Suzy, and apologies for being late. I think it's quite appropriate in a discussion about efficiency to be wrestling with inefficient technology to try and get to talk about it. But yes, let me tell you what we're doing at the Global Solutions Council, which some may have known by a different name. We recently changed the name from Global Government Carrier Group to Global Solutions Council this year, because we feel that this better represents what was considered to be quite a narrow scope for the organization. I mean, we've been going for nearly 20 years and primarily set up as a means for carriers to resolve issues relating to billing and settlements. If we're going back to the very old days of traditional bilaterals and so forth. And that forum has evolved over the years to also incorporate systems vendors, which is kind of a novel concept in this kind of environment, because getting carriers to collaborate is one thing, getting systems vendors to collaborate is a very different thing altogether. I mean, we're very used to having a sort of schizophrenic existence as carriers, that we compete with each other and we buy and sell from each other, and it's all fair. From a systems vendor perspective, they are looking at their customer, and obviously talking to their rivals is not really what they want to be doing particularly. But what we found is that by exposing everybody to the various issues that still plague the market to a large degree, we're able to get some better consensus and get people working in the same direction. I mean, we're talking about how to improve and remove the friction from transactions between carriers. This is an industry where not too long ago we were faxing each other rate sheets and then having fleets of people put them into systems, and dreadfully inefficient way of doing things. And that kind of extended its tendrils into all sorts of other activities related to settling a fast-moving, high-volume, high-revenue business. And it's just not appropriate. So what we've been doing is really trying to find ways to make things easier for people to transact with each other. Why should we be focusing too much on problems when we could be focusing on the actual business? What's the point in doing a deal if you can't settle it 3 years later? Why can't you get contracts signed quickly and so forth? And we're trying to sort of break down the barriers of those problems to make for a much smoother existence, because obviously the market is in a pretty tough time. COVID hasn't helped, of course, but we need to find ways of cutting through things that have held the market back. We should be able to operate pretty seamlessly, and we have old routines that really get in the way. So when it comes to things like OBR, which has been a headache for the industry over the last few years, how do you manage that particular minefield? Well, a start would be to have a standardized price list. If everybody subscribed to the same standard, at least you would know what you were getting and what you could bill and how that would look, rather than create a mountain of dispute based on pure ignorance of everyone's procedures. And just having that discussion moves the sort of feeling along that we can actually find simple solutions to problems that aren't as complex in reality as they're being made out to be. And this is, it's not just rate sheets, it's fraud, how to handle fraud disputes, what's the correct procedure for doing so, how can we make it easy? I mean, fraud is a persistent problem. How do we ensure that everyone can operate a bill to cash mechanism that sort of fits systems, fits the counterpart you're dealing with, and so on and so forth. I mean, the topics aren't limited. We sort of look at what's happening now and how do we then adapt to these changes and look at it from from Jussi's perspective. You're looking at it at a very high level on what could we be doing together, whereas we're looking at it on a far more granular operational level to actually take the grit out of some of these processes that have not been particularly efficient for as long as I've been in the industry, and that's sort of getting on for 25 years. So yeah, there's a lot to be done.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess the spectrum, as you've just mentioned, Simon, and also our panelist here, the spectrum is very broad and large, and there's a lot of areas where there is potential to do a lot of efficiencies in the way that the wholesale ecosystem operates. Where from you, Mark and Faïssal, from your independent side companies, where do you see what are the current developments that you can see in terms of trying to reach wholesale efficiencies, and what do you think where is the focus of your customers basically in terms of efficiencies currently?
Well, with Bank of Telecom, we're trying to go across the three areas of sales, operations, for finance. And actually, what Simon was talking about, billing disputes and so on. One of the simple things that we've done is simply give on the dashboard for every login user the billing time. So the time that the billing is set to is displayed. So there aren't any synchronization issues to start with when you're trading on the Bank of Telecom system. But we do look at it, as I said, between sales, operations, finance. So on the sales side, it's all about really talking to the account managers in our partner companies to find out exactly what they're looking for. And one of the big things is the ability to trade not only efficiently, i.e. by making the right commercial choices, but doing that very quickly and from a smartphone. That's the real driver. So basically, the ability to do what we call a special task, where you can simply buy a route, test it, and then put it into routing, all from a smartphone as a customer, rather than talking to an account manager over a Skype link or whatever, is really important, because sometimes commercial requirements are literally instantaneous. They may need to fulfill a customer requirement because of faulty routes, and they need to reroute. So we're effectively giving the customer the opportunity to not only trade, but do the routing on the services that they buy from us. So that's pretty leading, and that's where we're really focused on. So it's all about speed of operation, speed of execution, as well as the tasks that you can actually do faster.
So do you see that speed of operation, speed of execution as being one of the key areas that you in Lenderwize also need to operate, Faïssal, or are there any areas that you see as being key focus for efficiencies in your area?
Yeah, I will mention that on the payment flow, that there is still some issues between the different actors. I mean, there is trust between some actors, and sometimes there is no trust, which means that some big tier one telcos will ask from their partners, for example, which are very good partners, but sometimes to pay in advance or to pay too quickly. What we try to solve the problem is to make an automatic platform to allow the smaller, I will say, operators to have access to the best routes, even if there is sometimes a delay in receiving their invoices. So the fact that the platform is growing fast, and it allows to fund smaller operators to create the trust with the bigger ones, that help them to grow the business. It cannot happen every time, and there is a lack of business opportunities, which is lost. I will mention, but outside of the Lenderwize scope, in terms of efficiencies that we have been for the last, I would say, 10, 15 years, as I've been involved in this mobile messaging world, is that we assist for the last 3-4 years a bigger, I will say, consolidation of the segment. I mean, you have some big players. I mean, if you look at 10, 15 years ago, there was a lot of players, smaller players who were growing up. and more now, we try to see a consolidation of these players with some big groups. So that's, I'm sure it can help to create more efficiencies, but it can also reduce in the long term a kind of competition with the different actors. So by providing more efficiencies, more rules to be respected by the players, it can give space for smaller players to keep existing and also to have a better competition for the whole ecosystem.
Okay. In terms of efficiencies, do you see those efficiencies happening on the? I mean, when we had a discussion offline on this, we talked a lot about efficiencies happening on the technical or technological side, and the hurdles on the commercial side. Do you see those different areas as being obviously areas where efficiencies can happen? But do you see those happening in your areas? I mean, do you see, for example, I mean, you're very much involved on the commercial side. Do you see efficiencies there, and or what's your take on this? What's your take on this?
So I think from a commercial standpoint, I think as an industry, we are less capable of working together than what we are in a technical level. So there is and you know, we can see this through our sort of working groups, that when we have a technical problem to solve and there's lots of engineers and all that, there's plenty of discussions in working groups, and from MEF and everybody who's in various things, you always have a lot of people willing to contribute and all that. But when the discussion moves to some of the commercial aspects, like Simon mentioned, just having a standardization on rate sheet or something like that, normally the room goes quiet because people fear of revealing any competitive secrets. But then it's also this kind of attitude is that my way is the good way, your way is not necessarily it's not a good way, and this clearly has a sort of has an impact. So I would say that there is perhaps from the kind of executive side much more a appreciation that we need to work through on the commercial, especially for new future use cases, products that we don't necessarily even offer already, that because you could just see that whilst the technology is capable, the standards work, everything is as it should be, a lot of times these fall because of the commercial aspects hadn't been thought through. So that's a key thing in there, and quite often a lot of these efficiencies have to do with, because of the nature of the industry, where it's the interconnections, everybody is each other's supplier as well as a customer. You have a lot of these lot of issues in terms of when you move from a kind of a technical issue into a commercial issue. And I think generally speaking, I would say that there is still a bit of a rift between there. So not particularly good at addressing these more commercial issues. How do we actually do business versus how can we technically deliver this? Hence it's a sort of work, and interested obviously hearing what GSC is doing as well on that sort of thing. But I would assume that it's a sort of similar kind of discussions, a lot of just getting people into into admitting of the need of having to collaborate on that.
Simon, is this something that you experience as well?
Yeah, I think. I mean, this is where I sort of flip from one hat to the other and back again. But obviously, anyone operating a voice business is acutely aware of the challenges that market is facing, and obviously, it's incumbent on everybody to try and optimize wherever you can. I mean, we had the sort of TDM to VoIP swap over, which resulted in people sort of consigning legacy platforms to the dustbin and sort of embarking on a brave new world with all IP infrastructure. And then it sort of moves on to do the trading and operating systems cope with the complexity of fraud and OBR and so forth. So people have been making investments in those, and we're certainly no exception in that. You want to future-proof your business to the extent possible. And then you take it into the arena of the GSC, and of course, pretty much everybody is on a journey of that kind in some shape or form, which puts you in some sort of common ground. Obviously, you're very proud of your own particular decisions and solutions, but then it's about, the market doesn't exist in a vacuum. You've got to deal with and transact with these people that you're sitting in a room with, ultimately. Whatever technological advances they've made or whatever efficiency measures they've taken, you've still got to find a way of actually conducting the business. There's no point having lots of little islands failing to communicate with each other. How do you sort of cut through that? How do you share best practice? I mean, is it in my interest to keep secret how we've transformed the business and how we've updated our systems or changed our network? Well, no, because I do that because I want to do more business with other people. And therefore, if they understand how we hang together and how we operate, and we share some of our experiences about how we've gone about that, then of course that's contributing to that wider discussion. If everybody's sort of sharing their sort of experience and journey that they're taking on the efficiency side or the technological side or the business practice side, you're going to get some sort of common ground where people think, well, yeah, there's room to operate here. This makes this process easier, or by having that system, credit management's easier, or settlement or billing is swifter, or all these things. Because if you can't do those things properly, you're jeopardizing the relationships you have with your counterparts, and that's jeopardizing the very market itself. And it's not the most glamorous part of the business, but it's certainly the most important, because without it, there's not a lot going on. And that's really how we sort of position it. It's necessary to have that framework. We don't say everyone should do things in an identical way. It's more, how do you propose a sort of common standard or broad principles that can be adhered to, which people will say, yeah, that makes sense for us. Our process fits in with that. It makes, and that might change your decisions about who you do business with in the future. Is somebody more receptive to the way you want to work? It's not just about the price and the quality.
Yeah. So looking at this cross-carrier need for probably best standards and practices and to help efficiencies happen, how can individual companies like yours, Faïssal and Mark, how can they play an active role as key players of the ecosystem to support this and to really, further enhance, efficiencies in that space?
Well, I think with Bank of Telecom, what we're doing is we're offering a global price checker, for example, so that all the trades that are actually able to be done, all the pricing from all different carriers, are shared by cost, cheapest first to more expensive routes in one place. So basically, you can use us for lots of value-added areas, including the price checking, but also the trouble ticketing and monitoring of services and so on and so forth. So I think you've got to be fearless about this. What we're trying to do is develop a system that's a telecoms marketplace that provides efficiencies, and we just have to go with what our members want. But what they want to see is those types of services that can improve an investment or purchase decision, and pricing is probably the easiest one, because any carrier could collect all its rate sheets and display it to any other carrier. And that's what we've done, obviously anonymously, but we can share every price for every CLI route in the world, any non-CLI route in the world at any one point in time, with valid rates from something like 800 carriers. So it's really valuable as just a reference point for the market, so that any other carrier trading, even without us, can then see if they're actually trading at market rates or not.
Okay.
Go on, Faïssal. Yeah, and I will mention, Suzy, I mean, that's a topic that has been discussed in previous panel, but I think it's very important. I think that each partner of the whole ecosystem needs to make sure that the best practice are followed. When the best practice are not followed, it has an impact on the efficiency of all the actors. I mean, some tier one operators, when the best practice are not followed, are then reluctant to connect to new actors. And as far as we are concerned, Lenderwize, we have a very strict due diligence process for any partner we give money to. So we make sure that the business is real, that there is no fraud around the business. And I would say that if each partner of the whole ecosystem are following strict rules, that can also improve the whole sector. So maybe they should have everybody should have MEF stamp, for example, for following the rules that will double the number of members and that will make Dario very happy. But I think if each partner is working very closely regarding the process, the best practice, that can also help the whole system.
Mm-hmm. I'll have one question, and maybe that's not appropriate, but I'm curious, and then I'll jump onto a question that one of a member of the audience has just brought up. But to reach efficiencies, companies, individual companies who either belong to the forums that you're representing or who are your customers, they need probably to transform themselves. Do you where do you think people are in terms of transforming themselves, particularly in the environment in which we are? I mean, we've been talking, as I said in the introduction, a lot about new business models, etc., which would mean on the back of that, improve on efficiencies, and therefore probably also change the way you're operating to reach those efficiencies. Do you see those as being, happening in each individual players you deal with, or is this something that can be a blocker to those efficiencies? Whoever wants to take that question.
I can certainly jump in there. I think it's clear just from looking at the membership of GSC that pretty much everybody is engaged in a transformation process of sorts. Some have completed it, some are still sort of at the beginning of that particular journey. But I think there is a clear recognition that to sort of stand still or refuse to sort of acknowledge the changes that are happening is going to be fatal for people's businesses. And so whether they're going all in or whether they're looking to, borrow ideas from others just to sort of subtly adjust how they do things, that's still transformation. They're still looking to actively change the way they operate because, it's a differentiator. And if you're unable to keep up, then it's going to be very difficult to persist in the market. If everyone's moving a step forward and you're a step behind, that's a lot of ground to make up. I mean, if you make it hard to do business with, for you to do business with, then there's only one way out, because then it's not, as I said before, it's not just about choosing someone from a pricing or a quality or a capacity perspective. It's, well, is it going to take me ages to get my invoice, or they're going to take ages to pay? Are their disputes badly formatted? Are there, are their trouble tickets random? I mean, there's all sorts of things that can actually prejudice the way you want to do business. And so, getting people moving, whether, we're not expecting people to be homogenous and everyone do things the same way, but the fact that people are inching slowly forward is a step in the right direction. We're by no means there, but to create a sort of healthy and vibrant marketplace, you need to have people who are broadly on the same page. And I think that there must be very few that are refusing to sort of make that move and stay stubborn. I think it will be a death knell for them if they persist with that approach. So I think it's positive. Not everyone moves at the same pace, but there's certainly activity and certainly a desire to understand what other people are doing and sort of use those ideas and examples in their own businesses.
On your side, Mark or Faïssal, do you have any insights on this? I remember, Mark, you did mention that you faced a lot of training issues with your customers sometimes when it came to being able to implement APIs or moving towards the efficiency path. Is this something that you can relate to, or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, basically, there's an old adage that says that the only thing that's constant is change, and in this telecoms technology world that we live in, change is constant. Okay, so the first thing is everything's changing, as Simon said. Then I think you've got two choices as a business owner or CEO running a company. You can either develop that with the market and change your own systems and software in-house with your own systems development team, or you can outsource to third parties. There's pros and cons for both. But at the end of the day, one of the challenges with bringing, in our case, a marketplace to the market, is that we do have to train obviously our sales channels and then train our customers too. So there is that training that needs to go in, but the benefits that outweigh the time and effort to train the customer once they're up and running, and they can gradually grow into the system. So that's how we've done it. It's taken us 10 years now.
Thank you. I have a question from the audience. Doesn't the rush towards efficiencies just mean more centralization, which can ultimately stifle creativity and innovation? That's an interesting one. So who's taking this one?
So, yeah, no, I think it's valid question, but I think it's a sort of like when you're looking at efficiencies from an industry perspective, it's a slightly different than just purely looking at cost savings. I think that if you centralize things and make it organization bureaucratic, you're actually increasing inefficiencies. You are reducing efficiencies. I think what we're talking and what's absolutely critical is this sort of change. Obviously, it is an industry that has huge amounts of infrastructure, which you can't change overnight. There's industry with huge amounts of legacy issues that you need to take into consideration. If nothing else, some of them might be regulatory, legacy issues that you need to maintain and all of that. That's why it is so important to ensure that we ensure that at least the business, the intercompany business that we're trying to do, we don't create this sort of industry self-harm where we create various barriers and procedures and all of that just doesn't work, and embrace the opportunities to actually change things, even if in the short term they might cost a bit of money. So it's a kind of like the investment horizon is to be taken into consideration. Things like what's very big for us from the GLF, for instance, is around things like data on demand, which is obviously in your own network, not a problem. Somebody, customer calls, wants to increase the size of bandwidth, that's not a problem. The problem is that when you then interconnect with another carrier, who then might be with another operator and all of that. And at the moment, it means telephone calls to engineers, and it means, renegotiating contracts, and it means all that sort of things, which could be months, literally, just for a bit of an increase, which is, absolutely no reason for that. That's why it's so important that we advocate people to automate this using, APIs, for instance. It's important to ensure that we try to look at the settlement side. So instead of faxing, or now that's been replaced by emailing PDFs, is that again those are elements where that doesn't need to be done in a certain way. And ultimately, if you can do that, it just means that there's more product availability. You can innovate more with products that you have, or the capabilities that you have by innovating with more types of products and all of that. So definitely it's not about efficiencies and just cost savings of your existing organization. I wouldn't put those in the same bucket.
Yeah, it's actually true that very often we tend to associate efficiencies with cost savings, which is not actually the case. It's transforming also the organization for better growth in the future.
Yeah. And talent is a big thing of that as well. It's the sort of thing is that new people coming in there, are you going to teach them and train them to do the business as it was done in the 90s, simply because that's how your system is? That's inefficient, and maybe contributing to lack of sort of like a lot of talent not willing to go into the sector if they feel that this is not on the top end of progress.
Absolutely. So I have a hand telling me I have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to have to wrap it up very shortly. But before we do this, I wanted to ask you one last question. I'd like all of you to react onto this. Is looking ahead in terms of efficiencies, what you see today and how these efficiencies may move on in the future. Where do you think the important topics will lie on? Starting with Faïssal.
I want to mention that for the last 12 months, we have funded over $200 million of wholesale invoices. This figure could be triple in the next 12 months, if there are more efficiencies from all the different actors. So I think that agility, to be more agile from tier one to accept new partners could be something that helps. But of course, to make that happen, it's not only a matter of technical resources to connect to new partners. It's a very strong trust matter. And that's why everything which has been discussed during this panel and in the previous panel regarding trust between the partners is very key to make the whole business grow for each partner. That's what I want to mention.
So trust is what I hear. Mark?
Yeah, I think in the future, I think one of the biggest developments will be the widespread use of blockchain technologies across either just consolidating CDRs or internal telecom systems, but also for payments as well. There's some projects that we're working on that involves an instantaneous settlement service that's regulated using blockchain, which is called Blockcoin. So that's where it's going to go. Blockchain is going to really help us to achieve lots of efficiencies in telecoms and payments, basically. And I think it will really come to the front in the next year or two.
Blockchain, Jussi?
I agree. I think technology, its overall digitization of the business model and product as well, that's going to be inevitable, and it will require, significant wholesale, if that's the right word to use, changes in terms of, how actually business is transacted, and that's inevitable. And as a result, there's going to be winners and losers, but there's there's definitely going to be lots of opportunities to reimagine businesses.
Digitization to enable new forms of growth. And Simon?
Well, just to follow on what both Jussi and Mark have said, I think we're inexorably moving towards that kind of environment where we have blockchain and digitization really sort of dominating how we actually transact with each other. I think one of the big commercial challenges with that movement is, how do you maintain your edge? That's really the sort of your competitive edge if you are in a sort of very homogeneous environment, because that's, you want to cooperate, you want to collaborate, but you always want to do better than the next guy. That's the whole point of the business. So how do you retain that in this brave new world?
Yes, great. So probably it's a good topic for the next for an upcoming panel. How can you standardization of efficiencies and making sure that you differentiate yourself to innovate. So
there's a trade-off there for sure.
It's a trade-off, absolutely. So but an interesting one to look into probably next time. In the meantime, I'd like to thank you very much to all of you for taking part in this panel. I hope you enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed it myself. And I wish you a good day, and hope to see you soon again within MEF Connects Wholesale. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.